Vastushastra. Today, I will be focusing primarily on the scientific principles reflected from Vastushastra and its prospective adoption. The term ancient Indian architectural science and civil engineering can be summed up to the word called Vastushastra. The word Vastu, if you see, it has got its etymologically evolved from the Sanskrit root called Vasa. Vasanti Yatra Vastu, meaning is the science pertaining to dwelling is called Vastushastra. If we see Bhrigu Samhita, which defines the term Vastu, is much beyond a shelter for human concept, and it includes pests, flora and fauna, and also the cosmic experience. In this presentation, we will be using the word Vastushastra in the similar sense, that is ancient Indian architectural science and civil engineering. We find this concept of Vastushastra right from Atharva Veda. So we could see n number of verses which are being specifically devoted to the deity of either a Vastushpati or the concept of home. Some sample shlok has been already put on the slide here. The testimonial of Vastushastra can be found in the Indian subcontinent today in the form of temples and now survive as a manuals on design, layout, measurements, ground preparation, space arrangement, spatial geometry, and other aspects of architecture. However, we see a firm misconception about the word Vastushastra, and many people believe that Vastushastra is all about the directions and the corresponding auspiciousness. But that's not true. Let us now discuss these ignored scientific principles which made these ancient Indian abodes more contented. So from topic perspective, as we progress, we will first see the conceptual evolution of Vastushastra, its relationship with scores on the other sciences. The presentation primarily discussed the applied scientific principles and the norms that were recommended by Vastushastra and followed in ancient India. In the conclusion, as we will confer the relevance of Vastushastra and its practice, which is reinterpreted in the modern periods by renowned architects like Charles Correa, B.N. Doshi, and we will see how we can use those principles for today's or the modern time. In the interest of time, we have been given about 20 to 25 minutes. So we cannot cover the entire Vastushastra angle. However, I have tried my best to focus on the two aspects. Those are called as design excellence and constructional excellence. Within design excellence, I will spend more time on the standardization and customization aspects, land testing and selection aspects, and overall orientation or allocation. In the constructional excellence, we will see how the different structures have been recommended to design, different joints, more on the engineering side, how those are getting validated with the today's theory of engineering or a structural engineering specifically, and how the different material classification and selection methods were recommended by Vastushastra. The astute and aesthetic interest led man from the megalithic shelters to simple caves and then to aesthetically designed caves, towns, temples, and the homes. So if you could see bottom here, this is the way the exact evolution in the construction of homes has happened over a period of time across the world. Vastushastra can be traced back from the pre-Harappan periods to the Harappan periods, Vedic periods, post-Vedic Maurya period, and last about 800 years. From the explored pre-Harappan and Harappan sites, we could see significant uniformity in materials and methods of constructing structures throughout the northern Balochistan, where mud bricks, walls, and the stone foundations with a directional alignment was a key feature observed. In Vedic period, building operations came into existence as a system and not as a haphazard action. 30 different words are used to connote the dwelling places in Rigveda, whereas Atharva Ved provides a rich description of constructional parameters of homes. In the post-Vedic Maurya period, Vastushastra became a full developed architecture and civil engineering program as a part of Shilpa Shastra, dealing with detailing around land selection, requirement planning, orientation, elevation, material selection, and even interior design. And thus, we find three major styles of architecture called Nagara, Dravida, and Vesara evolved with own specific technological elements. For example, a Nagara style of architecture which prevailed in the northern India has its vertical drive of architecture. Whereas if you see typically a Dravidian style of architecture which will have a horizontal drive. The hybrid style is called Vesara style, which reflects the combination of vertical and the horizontal style. Thus, the entire anatomy of Vastushastra came into existence with three main treatises called Samarangana Sutradhara, Mayamatam, Manasara, and more than 800 related Sanskrit texts, 18 preceptors, 10 best sciences, and more than 13 major and derived styles of architecture. We have just seen the three main styles, but there are 13 different derived styles can be observed in the form of temples and some ancient homes in India. The core scientific principle of Vastushastra behind all these technologies are the same and referred as Ashtanga Vastushastra. Ashtanga means 8 elements, which includes a typically land selection, rituals, building materials, design and construction elements, the ergonomics of dweller, and the roles and the responsibilities of the crew, including the chief architect, some structural engineer, project manager, supervisors, laborers, and helpers. It also provides the best practices on renovation and interior decorations. The true profundity of Vastushastra can only be fathomed if we understand the scientific principles mentioned in Vastushastra treatises. Thus, it is imperative that we discuss these major principles, which will provide an insight to the primordial technicalities that were mandatory to be followed by any sthapati. A sthapati means the chief engineer. We have classified this principle into two areas, as I was mentioning, in the design excellence and the constructional excellence. Sthapati, the synonym for the modern term architect or a chief engineer, was responsible for the multiple roles, right from the land selection, design, and ensuring the legal compliance of the overall home building project coordination. Though the key role of architect is to design the home with all comfort, the legal compliance is equally crucial in the entire building project. We will now see the different compliances principles that were recommended and followed in ancient India. Brihat Samhita and Vastu Ratnavali recommends different rules of minimum and maximum habitant area based on the profession. For example, a king can build a home having maximum carpet area of about 28.5 thousand square feet, whereas a Raj Mahishi can have its home around minimum area of about 1,031 square feet. Assuming about 5 rooms a home, it is interesting to note that these recommendations ultimately leading towards a minimum habitant area of about 200 square feet per room, whereas the modern standard talks about 100 square feet per room. These recommendations are for every class and every strata of the society, including prostitutes. We could see clearly the length and the width are precisely defined with the multiple standardized options rather than the one base unit of square feet. This had ensured the required proportionality within the housing scheme with an overall flexibility of built-up area. Interestingly, while defining the area for land acquisition, Vastu Ratnavali prescribes that how it should be according to the dweller's height. It should not go more or less than that. This could also answer metaphorically the Leo Tolstoy's question, how much land one should have. The point is not about the accuracy and justification of measures on any grounds for contemporary relevance, but on the maturity observed in the overall process definition. Further, apart from the constructional compliances, we find the recommended code of conduct for dwellers mentioned in Arthashastra. In one of the examples, we see that the Arthashastra prescribes the penalties against the mal design of water channels and misbehaving. This is a very interesting kind of an observation where if you don't follow the compliance, then you will also get penalized. That's one of the efficient way of ensuring the excellence within the design and the execution. Moving ahead on the next topic, that how Vastushastra uses the geological principles to classify the land and prescribes its applications in the land testing and the selection program for the architecture. Bhrigu Samhita provides the detailed topography of India from Himalayas to Rameshwaram and classifies the same into 3 categories called Satvika, Rajasa, and Tamasa type of an land. These are depending upon the water and the rock disposition and geological movements. We could see a detailed description of the land quality, subtypes, wind directions, and the average temperature, and even the species and the human properties across these land categories. The empirical scientific approach further recommends which Vastu technology, that is a style of architecture, to be primarily used to ensure the best localized design. Thus, Samarangan Sutradhar, Mayamata, Manasara, and so many other texts provides a detailed account on plot selection, land testing methods, which are primarily empirical classification techniques to determine the superiority grade of the given plot based on its physical properties. A detailed selection logic in this is the text to determine the degree of acceptance and the strict rejections of the land based on the experimental results. For example, a uniform and the white colored land having opposite temperatures in the season is considered the best land for constructing homes. In modern context, we could conclude that the entire approach of Vastushastra in the land classification and the testing ultimately helps the architect and the civil engineer to select the right dwelling place with appropriate design and construction considerations like liquid limit, natural moisture content, natural dry density, plastic limit, and even the permeability. Let's now discuss the orientation and allocation aspects. The key objective of orientation is to maximize the natural benefits primarily from sunlight and wind energy. We find different approaches mentioned within the different styles of architecture to optimally utilize these natural amenities. The core allocation concept of Vastushastra in Vastu Purusha Mandala technically refers as the standard this site model. Famous modern architect Charles Correa says Vastu Purusha Mandala represents the energy fields, the center of which is simultaneously both Shunya, that is nothing, and a Bindu, that is a source of energy, truly the mind-blowing concept. Astonishing, similar to the black hole of a contemporary physics. Eventually, Vastu Purusha Mandala concept led to the narrow belief of a directional auspiciousness, probably due to the deity specified in each of these particular cells. The standard Vastu Purusha model of home was 8 by 8 and by 9 by 9 cells model appearing here. The corresponding allocation of a different rooms were planned accordingly. For example, the god's place, the kitchen, the ghee making area, the bedroom, the conjugal room, armory, etc. Allocation symbolically aims at a universal expression of the human-centric cosmic experience within own home and underlining principles of adequacy and privacy. Moving on to the engineering excellence observed from Vastushastra treatises, the role of engineer was right from the structural design, material and the people management, and ultimately ensure the quality of the home built, like the today's engineer. Let us now discuss the different types of joineries and their usage mentioned in Vastushastra. We could see here the engineering genesis in selecting right approach and proper methods of joinery. You could see the designs are moving in these directions. Mayamatam recognizes the need of different joints. Why? For this, the brick walls and the stone walls. It further suggests the third approach of constructing wooden pillar and the beam joints. Moreover, Mayamatam recommends safety measures while carrying joinery to avoid the cardinal points, intermediate points on the Vastu Purusha Mandala layout to ensure no structural defects or weakness form in the entire construction schema. And thus we see the testimonials are standing thousands of years against the natural and man-made calamities. The average age of an Indian temples which are made from the Vastushastra principles today is at least 1,000 years. Moving on to the next topic of material classification theory and its application in selecting the right building material for the home building proposed by Vastushastra. Mayamatam describes 7 primary materials, namely the sand, the bricks, the lime, stone, wood, metals, precious stones, as the primary building materials. We also see the references of the secondary materials like an artificial and natural chemicals, colors, food and medicinal items, and glass, etc. We could see a typical approach followed by Mayamatam in material classification theory based on the Dharma Shastra principles. All the materials are classified based on the class, gender, state, and applicability. Thus, we see the 4 different grading of typically spectroscopic properties to classify the material from high to low magnitude. The metallurgical properties are classified using the symbolic gender criteria, wherein the high compressive material are called masculine and the feminine materials are those having high tensile strength. Based on the current status of the material, they are classified into 5 different types to determine the applicability and suitability for the purpose of the use. Samarangana Sutradhar mentions the Sthapati should review all the material before its use and recommend the right action. Due to time constraint, we have only seen few aspects of Vastushastra, but the list is endless. If you really see the life for a given home, which has been described to be made in Vastushastra treatises, is at least 200 years, whereas it will go on an average about 1,000 years. That's a recommendation to construct the home. There is another interesting area which is called imitating the best style of design. This means whatever the god or the nature has created, a sthapati has to imitate exactly the same. That will ensure the longevity, a natural smoothness, as well as the sustainability in the modern terms. There is a high degree of commitment and the quality performance been mentioned in Vastushastra treatises. Measurement of space, volume, mass, and the motion, all these we could see and very detailed treatment in Vastushastra treatises. There are different grades of instruments and the tools are mentioned. There are very interesting way of doing the interior decoration, the gardening aspects, the exteriors, and of course, the renovation and the repairs. We couldn't cover it in detail today in this discussion, but I'm happy to take any questions if you have later on this. In conclusion, we could see that the core scientific theory of Vastushastra is a universal and its technological application is very local. Being an applied science, it provides the necessary detailing to create the unique experience of the cosmic connection still looks at the basic physical requirements of the sustainability and suitability of the home across all phases of life. Thus, it has got a compassion in the heart for the human development. Like mathematics was composed as a Sanskrit poem in ancient India, we see the confluence of art and technology in Vastushastra as an aesthetic engineering. In the concluding remark, I would like to use the Charles Correa's remarks, whereas he is mentioning that there's a lot of things which we can learn from our past. Vastushastra was evolved and flourished in the times where the less population and the opulence of resources. However, the designing concept of Vastushastra are timeless and attached to the human-centric cosmic experience. I strongly believe it provides an ample opportunity to the modern architects to reinterpret the theory of Vastushastra in contemporary sense. This also means new avenues of interdisciplinary opportunities within the Sanskrit language, modern architectural science, and modern civil engineering. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rahul. Your presentation is very excellent. And also in the present, we introduced the Vastu Vidya degree program, but we have many challenges for that because of the modern architectures is challenging for that. I think there in this presentation also there is some replies for that. I think it is very good. And also the in our Sanskrit is the main thing from this. This is not only teaching the building materials or buildings, but it's the family also how to plan in the well family and satisfy the ISA. Then I think it is very excellent presentation. Thank you very much again for you. We have another 2 presentations. After this 3 presentation, we will give the discussion to audience. Again, thank you. Then I invite the second presenter. Our second presenter is the Venerable Dr. Jambugahapite Dhammaloka Hamurwa. He is a senior lecturer in Sanskrit at the Department of Classical Languages, University of Peradeniya, Sri Lanka. He obtained his PhD from the University of Canterbury, New Zealand in 2020. His doctoral research won the prize of honorable mention at the Division of the History of Science and Technology Dissertation Prize 2021, awarded by the International Union of History and Philosophy of Science and Technology. He has published a few books, Sinhala translation of Sanskrit text, including the Sinhala Manjusri Bhasita Chitra Karmasastra, and some research papers and articles on scientific literature in Sanskrit and other related genres. We would like to invite to the presentation Hamudrone Vahansita Avastava. Gaurana Vahansata Piliganna.
Thank you very much, sir. And thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And I am very happy to be in this conference as a presenter. Let me first share my presentation. Okay, today I am going to talk about a little bit about potentiality of Vastushastra in modernity, in modern context. Actually, in the first presentation, Dr. Rahul discussed Vastushastra in great detail in its history, origin, and the true meaning of Vastushastra and how it evolved. And so therefore, I am not going to talk about that in detail, but I need to actually focus on a little bit about Vastushastra literature. So my presentation is more into Vastushastra literature and the mathematical side of Vastushastra rather than the technology and technical part of Vastushastra. So as a Sanskritist, I would like to see the Vastushastra and its literature from Sanskrit perspective. So my focus is basically on Vastushastra literature and the how this Vastushastra, the rules and instructions given in the Vastushastra related to mathematical literature in Sanskrit. So basically, my presentation would be a kind of combination of Vastushastra literature and also the mathematical literature. So as Dr. Rahul mentioned in the previous presentation, there are lots of literature on Vastushastra, particularly in Sanskrit, and there are some Vastushastra literature, Vastushastra texts in other vernaculars and also in Dravidian languages. So hundreds of Vastushastra literatures are there, the texts are there, and the scholars actually have explored very little of that. So there are lots to do for the better understanding of this Vastushastra. And it is considered the discipline called Vastushastra actually has been considered as one of scientific knowledge in India, and it is still considered as a scientific discipline in India. So the term Shastra is used in the sense that this is a kind of acquired knowledge, proved knowledge. So we have different types of Shastras in Sanskrit, not only in Sanskrit, in other vernaculars as well. So basically, Vastushastra, as Dr. Rahul previously correctly mentioned, is the science of dwellings and other constructions. So, we need to actually closely look at these texts, and we have to closely analyze these texts to understand Vastushastra in depth and for the better understanding of that. And we can do two different things. And first is we can actually study texts. So there are hundreds of manuscripts manuscripts of the texts in different parts of India, in some libraries and other manuscript repositories. So actually, the one who knows Vastushastra and Sanskrit and other vernaculars can read these, should read these manuscripts and actually analyze them and reveal what inside them. And the other research one can do is that compare the rules and instructions given in the Vastushastra texts and the materials, the real constructions we can see the built in past and also currently being built. So these two different researchers actually can reveal how these Vastushastra principles are practical. So this is so my presentation more into this kind of what kind of research we can do with these Vastushastra texts and how it is important in modern context. Because Professor Jayawardena mentions that some people think that this is just a kind of superstitious or outdated discipline, because some people just emphasize some rules and rules and instructions given in the Vastushastra, but they don't think about, or they don't know about the actual technical part behind and actual scientific part behind these rules and regulations and instructions. So basically, the main purpose of the Vastushastra is to construct a building which is beautiful, durable, and utilizable. So someone asks that what comes first, beauty or technology? What is most important in construction, beauty or technology? Actually, these both aspects are very important, but there's no doubt that technology is important, and we have to maintain beauty according to the technology. And the best answer might be there should be a harmony between these two. We cannot actually emphasize beauty at the cost of technology. So the technology, the scientific part is most important. If we consider as we know, there are lots of measurements and figures and some rules, instructions in Vastushastra literature, lots of numbers and the figures are there. So these numbers and measurements and figures are some inherent integral parts of mathematics. So if we consider the Vastushastra and mathematics, Vastushastra, the relation between these two, actually we can find some evidence right from the Sulla Sutras, which were written in like around 500 BCE. So Sulla Sutras are basically the treatises on constructing Vedic altars. So in Sulla Sutras, we see different kinds of figures and measurements, and to get these measurements, they introduce some mathematical rules, some operations and theories and so on. At the beginning, mathematics was a part of this the science of construction, but later on, the astrologers and astronomers improved mathematics, and they introduced different kinds of rules and operations into mathematics. So later on, it was a part of astronomy and astrology, but in the beginning, mathematics was a part of science of construction. So in the Sulla Sutras, they introduced lots of figures and how to find the area and how to convert one figure into another figure. And even the so-called Pythagorean theorem is in Sulla Sutras. So we can see this combination, this relation between Vastushastra and mathematics in very ancient time as well. In the Vastushastra literature, it is emphasized that using the correct measurements is very important. This is actually, I have quoted some verse here from the Manjusri Bhaja Chitrakarma Shastra, which was written in Sri Lanka around 5th, 7th centuries. Yadihina tiriktan chet stan nashan dhanakshayam karturu bhartu narendrasya satrasya vinashanam tasmat sarva prayatnena tunga mangala sangamam. So it says that if the measurement is less or more than the recommended measurement, the place will be destroyed, the wealth will be lost, the utter loss will come over to the constructor, patron, king, as well as to the country. Therefore, the beneficial, that means correct measurements should be taken at any cost. So So most people actually emphasize these part, the Karturu Bhattu, Narendrasya, Narestracha, Vinashanang, and so on. But what they wanted to emphasize here is that the correct measurements are to be taken. It's not just because the wealth will be lost or someone might be dead. That's not the reason, but it is important to follow these measurements which are given in the text, but there is a rationale behind these numbers. So basically in Vastushastra text, we see numbers. So if you build a palace for king, you should take this, the whole palace, the length of the whole palace should be this, and it should be this, and it the proportions this could be these, and this kind of measurement, the recommendations are in Vastushastra literature. And the most interesting thing is that they don't explain the rationale behind these numbers, how they calculate these numbers, and what is the rationale behind these numbers. So this is not actually a kind of characteristic of Vastushastra literature. So if you go to the mathematical literature and others, many other literatures, they don't give the proofs, they don't give the method they calculated, but they just give the numbers or just the rule. So that means these treatises, these texts have been designed just to use for practical purposes, not to teach the discipline to the students. So they haven't been designed as textbook, school text, like school textbooks. So they just wanted to give some guides and instructions to the yes, who are the engineers. So we know actually in Indian context, there are two kinds of lineage. One is the family lineage. So this knowledge has been passed from one generation to the other generation in family lineage. And the other one is professional lineage. So there are professionals, so they practice their profession, and they have some the other people work with them, and they pass this knowledge from professional them to the people who work under them. So we have these two kind of professional lineage. So these Vastushastra texts are designed to give some important instructions. So the all important facts are not mentioned in Vastushastra text. So as a modern scholars and who are keen in analyzing and understanding these principles and instructions, in general, these numbers, what we have to do is that we should actually go back to those original texts and analyze and try to find out what rationale and what methodology they have used, what rules they have used to calculate these numbers. When we talk about these measurements in Vastushastra texts, we see different kinds of measurements. This is basically from Manjusri's book, Mana, Pramana, Parimana, Unmana, Upamana, Lambamana, and so on. So we need length, breadth, circumference, measurements of gaps, measurement of projections, perpendicularity, and so on. So if we talk about a little bit about this circumference. So if someone wants to find out the circumference, we can actually easily measure the length and breadth and height and so on, the projection of the measurement of projection, measurement of gaps, but it's not easy to find out circumference. I mean, it's easy as modern scholars and who know basic mathematics, it's not very difficult to find out the circumference. But as a practical Sthapatya, I mean, if someone work under that Sthapatya, probably he doesn't know how to calculate the circumference of a given circle. So that's why in Vastushastra text, these numbers are directly given, and they can just follow these numbers and build, make the construction and other the buildings. So, but behind these numbers, there is definitely the rule and the theorem of the formula of finding circumference. So the question is that where these formulas and rules and theories come from. And we see this kind of unit measurements in Vastushastra and also mathematical texts. So if we look at the Mayamata and Manasara, there's nice verses on these kind of measurements, unit measurements. 8 hours are equal to 1 angula, 1 hasta constitutes of 24 angulars, and so on. This might be a little bit different from the one in the Mayamata and Manasara, but this is from actually Leelavati. It's not very different from the what given in the Vastushastra. So we see that they have there was a standard system of measuring linear measurements. And when we talk about the figures, there are lots of figures used in Vastushastra: circular figures, rectangular figures, squares, semicirculars, and convex the figures, and also concave figures, and so on. So at the same in the same way, we can see those kind of figures in mathematical literature as well. In all mathematical texts written in India, in Sanskrit and other vernacular texts, I mean, almost all texts have a separate section called Kshetra Vivahara, Kshetra Ganita, so which is the section on geometry. So in this geometry section, they introduce all the basic figures and the rules related to these basic figures: how to calculate area, how to calculate the circumference, the diagram, diameter, and so on. So the Pythagorean theorem and related other theorems are also given in the in this section in mathematical texts. The very interesting thing is that they define the figures, especially in the Patiganita. We see in the commentary on the Patiganita, the mathematicians say Ishtavadikaha Deshaika Deshaha. He defines the figure as the space enclosed by a chosen border. So whatever space enclosed by a border is considered as a figure. So he further mentions that the figures whose area can precisely be determined are the real figures. So they considered that the area of a figure has to be determined. I mean, the figure whose area can be determined is considered as a figure. So they explain, actually they recommended different types of figures in these mathematical texts, and this mentions that the people, the mathematicians, and one who uses them can make new figures using these basic figures. In Ganjasahara Sangraha, actually, they categorize figures, all the figures, into 3 different types: trilateral, quadrilateral, and circles. In trilateral category, there are three types of trilaterals: triangles, equilateral triangle, isosceles, scaling. quadrilaterals are 5-fold: equilateral, equibilateral, equitrilateral, unequal, and rectangle. And circles are 8-fold: circle, semicircle, ellipse, conch-shaped circle, concave circular, convex circular, outlining annals, and in-reaching annals. So in the next slide, you can see these different types of figures are recommended in mathematical texts. Especially this is from Ganjasara Sangraha, written by Mahavira in 8th century. So these are different types of triangles, and these are different types of quadrilaterals. And these basic features are used in Vastushastra, and the Sthapatyas has liberty to actually reshape them. So, and the mathematicians also did that, and they recommend that those who know how to manipulate them well, they can build, create, make new figures using these basic figures. And these are circulars. Actually, this is a last quadrilateral, and this is a circle which is called Samavrutta and Ardha Samavrutta, and Ayatavrutta, which is ellipse. And these are different types of circle according to Patiganit, and according to Ganjasara Sangraha. In other texts as well, we see these different types of categories. So there is a kind of background behind these all mathematics and numbers and figures mentioned in the Vastushastra. I'm not saying that only Vastushastra took these different types of figures and numbers from mathematics, and in Vishnu Dharmottara Purana it says that the mathematics is the base of all the sciences and arts. So probably this background knowledge of mathematics influence all these different types of sciences. Definitely, if we work with numbers, of course, we need to have kind of mathematical background and mathematical rules and theories. And for an example, if we look at Manasara, it has categorized buildings into few different categories. The criteria for this categorization is the shape of the topmost part, size of the building, material, various length of the cubit, and shapes. Apart from this material, all the other criteria related to mathematics. So yeah, and if you go to the Agni Purana, it mentions that the different kinds of shapes related to different constructions. Vairajya construction has to be quadrangular, Pushpaka has to be rectangular, Kailasa has to be circular, Manika has to be oval, and Revishtapa has to be octagonal, and so on. Therefore, we can assume that, and it is not, it is beyond the doubt that these mathematics, the rules and theories mentioned in mathematical texts actually influenced, and the Sthapatyas and other engineers, architects studied them, and they used them in these calculations. So this is where the numbers and figures come from. For an example, in Vastushastra literature, we always see that the rule of proportion. So especially when it comes to construct statues and other some artifacts, it says that they has to be these construction statues and others have to be proportionate. So rule of proportion is the base of this kind of constructions, and in mathematical text it is said that the rule of proportion is like the god Vishnu. Just as the god Vishnu prevails everywhere, prevails in 3 worlds, the rule of proportion is everywhere. The base of all the mathematical computations calculation is the rule of 3. So that means that is Trirashika. If we know the three quantities, we can easily find the fourth one. So this in the Siddhanta Sekara, it is explained in this way. So this is the layout given in mathematical text. So this is argument, and this is the phala, and this if we know A, B, C, we can find the fourth one. So for an example, suppose someone wants to make a idol, a statue, and he is going to make a statue of Dashatala. So he's taken his thala as 12 inches. So his idol, the height of idol might be 120 if he takes his thala to be 12 inches. So if he takes his thala to be 18 inches, what would be the height of the idol? So he wants to find this. So if he exactly follow this rule, he can easily find out it is to be 180 inches. So this is actually, this is not actually very complicated arithmetic. This is very simple arithmetic, but today as modern scholars, we can easily find out these answers. But the scholars who read ancient texts have to think of how they calculate these numbers. So how they found out these numbers and what kind of procedures they follow. Actually, if we look at these mathematical texts, they might give some answers to those questions. And perpendicularity, this is also important when it comes to constructions. So for vertical perpendicularity, we can use plumb lines. For horizontal perpendicularity, we have to use actually Pythagorean theorem. So in Sulla Sutra, actually we see a very simple way to get this perpendicularity. So the Sulla Sutra mentions that take rope with 30 units and mark this 30 unit rope at the point of 5 units, at the point of 12 units from this point, and stretch this 5 units part in one side and stretch the 12 unit parts the other side. If this is horizontal, and stretch this 12 unit parts to vertical. And
Reverend, how much time you need more?
I am going to finish in 2 minutes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Then if we join this 13 unit path to the first end of the rope, we can exactly get the right angle triangle. So we can easily get this perpendicularity. So this is a kind of very simple way to get the perpendicularity using just rope. So this is from actually Sulla Sutras, and even more complicated the rules are given in mathematical texts. And also find out there are some other rules related to constructions in mathematical texts. This is for finding the number of bricks needed to construct a particular building. How many bricks are needed to construct a particular building, and if we apply this formula, this is number of bricks. If we know the volume of the stack, volume of the wall, and volume of the brick, we can easily find out how many bricks are needed to build that wall. And finding the number of layers of a stack. So they give these formula for that. And also, if you want to build this, we can apply the same, this kind of construction, we can apply the same formula. And to find out this, the volume of this, they give this formula in mathematical text. Actually, yeah, in different mathematical texts, they have different types of formulas. But finally, what I wanted to say is that in modern context, we actually happy to see the science behind the numbers. We happy to see the science behind the figures, and we always want to see the proofs and how these numbers and figures came into being, and why this particular number is used, and why this particular figure is used, and where they all come from. So if we look at from that perspective, I think to understand and to answer those questions, this mathematical text might be helpful for us. And so this kind of research are needed to actually validate the Vastushastra in modern context. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Venerable Amadwanta. Actually, his presentation was totally about the measurement and mathematics according to the Vastushastra. I think it is for the pathway to our scholars to do the research and other things too, and Vastushastra according to that, how to measure these things included his presentation. Thank you very much again. We have to have the limited time. Therefore, I invite our third presenter. He is our department member. Therefore, I'm proud of him because of the younger scholar also, and doing many research works and also the technical works. Therefore, I would like to introduce him. Venerable Udwala Revath, who works as a senior lecturer at Department of Sanskrit and Eastern Studies, University of Kelaniya. He is major in Vastushastra and the founder of the Vastuvidya degree program in University of Kelaniya. He successfully achieved his first degree, which is called Rajakiya Pandit in 2002, when he was very young. That means the 17th year. Yes, that means the teenage, I think. Yes, all. To my mind, he is the youngest scholar who passed that exam in near Sri Lankan history. He was the island first in that year by winning Vidya Sekara scholarships. He was fortunate enough to be an undergraduate in the university in 2003 and completed his BA Honours in Sanskrit in 2008. He could win 3 gold medals, such as Professor M.H.F. Jayasuriya Gold Medal for the highest marks of Sanskrit, Kotahene Panyakirti for the highest marks in the Faculty of Humanities, and Ratmalani Dharmalok Gold Medal for the highest marks in the University of Kelaniya. He completed his Master of Philosophy in 2012 with merit pass. He has published more than 40 research articles and 12 books. 3 of them are on Vastushastra. I respectfully invited to him to present his presentation.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the organizing committee, I cordially admired the contribution made by the previous two presenters, Dr. Rahul Atlekar and Venerable Jambugapiti Dhammaloka Thero, and the contribution made by the head of the department, Professor K.B. Jayawardena, being the monitor of this panel discussion. So, this is the topic I selected to discuss today in this panel discussion, Vastushastra principles for future perspectives. So I think previous two presenters explain what is Vastu. Vastu, that is the word, that is the term we use in order to explain Vastu. Vas is the root of the term Vastu, which means house, home, site, and homestead, building, and so forth. So according to the Monia-Williams dictionary, it is explained in that manner. And commonly, generally, it can be analyzed as the traditional Indian way of architecture. And I would like to explain this Shastra as the art and science of designing and constructing of buildings. So according to the Kautilya, you know, a great scholar in ancient India, he wrote a great text which is called Arthashastra. In that book, Vastushastra has been divided into 4 categories. The first one is Yana and Dhara and Harmya and Paryanka. Dhara means earth. Dhara means earth. Yana means conveyance. And the Harmya means buildings. And the final one is Paryanka. Paryanka means bested. So that is the scope of Vastushastra. So there are so many authors on Vastushastra. To my mind, some people say those authors are sages. When we hear the word of sage, normally we think that they have a superpower and they can fly on the sky and they are magicians. My point of view, it is wrong because I think they are scientists. They are good researchers. They always focus what is happening around them, especially in the environment. By considering what is happening around them, they created these Vastushastra principles. So when we consider about the history of Vastushastra, there are 2 traditions. The first one is southern tradition, and another one is northern tradition. Southern tradition represent the Dravida school, and the northern tradition is well known as the Nagara schools. So when we consider about the Sri Lankan context, we have the influence of both these traditions. So according to my topic, I must analyze what is Vastushastra principle. So when the sages or ancient researchers created these principles, they concern about the 5 factors, especially the variables and the vibration of 5 factors, such as Patavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu, and Akas. By considering the variables of these 5 factors, they created and established these Vastushastra principles. And another thing is, when we consider about what is Vastushastra, Vastushastra guides us how to balance these 5 factors. How to balance these 5 factors. And the second factor, when we consider about the Vastushastra principle, we have to remember that all the Vastushastras, all the principles related to Vastushastra have been created by considering the birth time of a person's one's birth time. So that is the second thing we must remember when we talk about the Vastushastra principles. So on the basis of the birth time, all the principles have been introduced. And when we consider about the shapes and the forms and the measurements, you know that there is a interdependence relationship, gravity and the geometrical shapes. For example, when we go to, buy a shirt, we consider about the color of the shirt and the material and the shapes. Sometimes we consider about the brand also. So early ancient sages, they actually concern everything, especially the interdependent relationship between the gravity and the geometrical shapes. By considering the relationship between gravity and the geometrical shapes, they created these Vastushastra principles. So I categorize these Vastushastra principles into 4 aspects. So we can clearly see these 5 factors in Vastushastra principles. The first one is we can see the social and religious aspect and the creativity and the technology, as well as the sustainability and the adaptability and the identity. You know that when we consider about the Sri Lankan history, among the ancient ruins, we can also see all these 5 factors: social and religious impact, aspect, and the creativity, technology, and the sustainability and the identity. You know that the first city in Sri Lanka is Anuradhapura, which was established by King Pandukabaya by taking advices given by the Pandula Brahman. I think he actually guided for establishment of this town in Anuradhapura. So when we consider about the information, we can see in Kautilya's Arthashastra, there is more similarities with the principles. So then we can see from the beginning of the house planning in Sri Lanka, there is a clear influence of Vastushastra principles as depicted in Sanskrit primary text. So another example, so when we consider about this, I think you can see this picture. I can take this picture as an example. So this is just a simple clay pot. It's a simple clay pot. So, ancient people knew how to produce, how to create a clay pot. I think creations of a clay pot is a simple thing. But when we consider about the process of creation of a clay pot, okay, you must understand there is a technology behind that. Okay. First of all, we must know how to select suitable soil and how to stabilizations, how to stabilize the clay, and we have to know what is the accurate level of water and how to decrease and increase the level of the fire. So this is the process of creation of a clay pot. So this picture I selected from one archaeological site in Sri Lanka that is adjacent to the Sigiriya, which is one of the world wonders. So this is taken from Ibankatua cemetery site. So in that time, ancient people in Sri Lanka knew this technology. So this is the very important factor we must understand when we consider about the ancient construction in Sri Lanka. So another thing is why actually they use this clay pot. You can see another two pictures on the slide. Then at that period, according to the influence of social and religious contemporary time, when one died, they burn the dead body, and at the end they collect ash and put into this clay pot. So that is because of the social and religious impact. So when we see a clay pot in an archaeological site, so two factors we can understand. The first factor is the technology behind that, and the second factor is the contemporary social and religious impact. And third one is creativity. You know, they use this clay pot to put the ash. So no need to adorn it, no need to what you call that, carve it. You know, ancient people carved it, and by putting flowers, sometimes pictures of animals. So they added the creativity to this. So that is another marvelous things we can see among the ancient construction in Sri Lanka. So another thing is, nowadays we are using many equipments to fulfill our day-to-day necessities. So I think very rarely we use clay pot to bring water or something else. But today we use different types of pots, I think, which are made by iron and different types of materials. Those pots are not actually eco-friendly, but you can take this clay pot. Clay pot is, ecological and sustainable, as well as the adaptability you can see. So these are the four factors we can discuss by taking this simple example. And moving on to next slide, I would like to focus your attention to this. This is called Biso Kotua. You know that ancient people knew how to plan the Biso Kotua. You know that the first Biso Kotua, when we consider about the technology, and the last Biso Kotua in Sri Lankan history, the technology they practice is similar. There is no any difference between the first Biso Kotua and the last Biso Kotua. Why? Sometimes you may think that they don't know how to develop the technology to the next level. That is not the idea. They, when we consider about the first Biso Kotua, they knew and they practiced the 100% perfect technology to plan and establish this Biso Kotua. So that is the thing. That is why they no need to change the last Biso Kotua when compared to the first Biso Kotua in Sri Lankan history. So moving on to next slide, I will explain furthermore what actually we can see among the ancient construction in Sri Lanka. This is a guard stone. In Sinhala we say Muragala. Why actually we use this Muragala or guard stone? In ancient times, normally architect or carpenter created staircase by using stones. So in order to strengthen the staircase, they use this stone as a supporter in early times. there is no any picture, there is no anything, there is nothing. They only put a stone as a support. But later on, they added many things. So they knew how to create a stone into this beautiful picture. So you can see they use this muragala or gas stone in early days as a supporter of the staircase. But when you see this picture, you can see there is a I think image. On the top of the image, you can see there are head of serpents. Sometimes you may see 5 heads of serpents, sometimes more than that. Why actually ancient people created this gas stone in that manner? When we consider about the reason, you know that there is a inscription called Tiriai, I think, which is in Trincomalee. In that inscriptions, you may find the details, information related to the Tapassu Balluka, who actually once visited Lord Buddha and came, and they built up a pagoda which is called Girihandu Sai. So there is an inscription that is called Tiriyai inscription. In that inscription, clearly mentioned these Tapassu Balluka, they did the Kraya Vikraya Bik. Kraya Vikraya Bik in Sanskrit. Kraya Vikraya Bik means they are sailors. They actually do the import and the export in Sri Lanka. So on the other hand, you know that the Sri Lanka is an island. Around the country, you can see the oceans. So their second duty is to protect this country from the foreign enemies. So ancient architects, they knew that. So that is why when they create this gas stone, they actually symbolize, they added that into this gas stone. So that is called creativity. Okay? By putting a gas stone as a supporter is a technology. You know that the stone is a natural thing, so no need to talk about the sustainability behind this. And you know, they added the image of serpent's head, and that is because of the impact of social and religious containing in that type. And when we consider about the moonstone means Sandagada Pahana. Normally it is a doormat. It is the doormat. But early times, when they create this moonstone, they use the technology and the creativity, and you can see good purpose of creations this moonstone. Then you can see some what you call that, the purpose. So when we consider about the gas stone as well as the moonstone, for example, then you can see these 5 factors among these ancient constructions. And when we consider about the Korawak color or balustrade, that is another part of the staircase in ancient construction, you know, they added some what do you call that, the previous birth stories related to the Bodhisattva. They try to guide us by putting those carvings to the balustrade for Korawak. So they actually try to give us a lesson by putting important images to those creations. And because of the limited time, moving on to next slide, I would like to focus your attention to the Dalanda Maligava. or Secret Truth Temple in Kandy. When you see this, you can see actually I would like to focus your attention to the three factors. The first factor, you can see the clouds on the wall. You know, clouds are not on the earth, clouds are on the sky. Why ancient people put the clouds, you know, on the top of the wall in this particular building? So there should be a reason you have to consider. So what is the reason behind this? Why actually ancient constructed put the clouds on the wall of this building? So another thing is, you can see the Pattiripua. I think the shape of the Pattiripua is in octangle or Astastra. So why it is built up in that manner? Why it is built up in shape of octangle? So you have to consider that fact also. And there is another small picture, then you can see the Candy Lake. So in the middle of the Candy Lake, there is a garden also. I think every Sri Lankan, I think, knows that this is called Skirisagare or milk oceans. So those are the three factors I would like to share when we talk about the Secret Truth Temple in Kandy. Why? What are the reasons behind this? You know that King Rajasingha actually wanted to pretend to be as the Sakra or Indra. Sakra means the Lord of the gods. So he is in the heaven. So that is why King Rajasingha put the clouds on the wall. And you know that according to the literature, it is said that the Sakra wears a gem which is in octangle. So that is why he built up the Pattiripua in that shape. And the milk oceans, when we consider about the Hindu methodology, we can see the story, many stories related to the milk oceans. So it is also in the heaven. So that is why ancient constructed actually built this Sacred Truth relic in Kandy. So moving on to next slide, I would like to talk more about the technology and the creativity and the sustainability we can see among the ancient construction in Sri Lanka. These four pictures I took from the Ambedkar Devalaya, which is actually belong to the Gampola period in Sri Lanka. So when we consider about the wooden creations, so I think these creations are actually more than 1,000 years old. So it's still preserved. Still you can see these creations if you can go to Ambedkar Devalaya. So you can imagine how all of these wooden creations, more than 1,000 years. So you must understand what is the technology behind this. So ancient people knew how to preserve, how to conserve the wooden timbers. So to my mind, it is said that they, after preparing timbers, they put these timbers into clay for a month or more than that. So that is the process they practice to preserve the wooden timbers. So nowadays, I think a lot of researchers are doing researchers. What is the technology ancient people used to protect or preserve the wooden timbers? So then you can see beautiful pictures, beautiful creation on this Ambedkar Devalaya. Some of them are, you know, some of them are reflected the shape of 3D shapes. Okay, ancient people, they knew the technology. So they use that and they preserve the timber wood. Finally, they added the creativity to them. So when we talk about the wooden timbers, no need to clarify about the sustainability. You can see the wooden timbers. So you know that when we consider about the Vastushastra or architecture in Sri Lankan context, we cannot forget the Jeffrey Bawa, who is considered as the father of modern architecture. So he used and introduced one great principle which is called tropical modernism. So according to the tropical modernism theory, actually he used ancient constructions or the methods which actually used by ancient constructors, especially the 5 factors. He studied and he used those 5 factors when he planned or designed a particular building in Sri Lanka. For instance, I took 2 buildings. Here you can see there is a picture of Parliament. Nowadays, we don't like to talk about more about that particular building, but unfortunately, I have to talk now, because when we consider about the ground floor of the Parliament, you know, Jeffrey Bawa took some examples from the ground floor of the Ruwanali side. Another thing is, which is called Sima Malakaya. You can see in Hunupitiya, Gangaramaya, in the middle of the Bere Lake. So when he planned this Sima Malakaya in Bere Lake in Colombo, he actually took the Sitala Maligava, which actually can be seen in the middle of the Parakrama Samudra. So he studied the methods which actually used by the ancient constructors. So that is why he could design and plan a marvelous buildings in Sri Lanka. Another thing is, so this is another examples. You know, I can say, moving into next slide, you can see these 4 pictures. First picture is related to the Dambulu Vihara. So you can see the Khataram, or nowadays we call it step. So Katarama, in early days, ancient people actually built up or created this Katarama in order to protect their caves from the rains. So they actually practice highly developed technology to create, in order to create this Katara. So when down the line of Sri Lankan history, it has changed later on as the valence board or Pesia. In Sinhala, we call Vadimbua. So when we consider about the Vadimbua, in I think most of the time in early constructions, they use the wooden timber to create this Pesia or valence board. But nowadays, we use plastic or we use iron or different types of materials to create these valence boards or a gutter. So now you can compare the modern materials and the ancient materials. So ancient people, they selected eco-friendly materials to create valence boards and the Pesia, but in modern day, we select very harmful materials for creations of valence boards. So and we can see, this is the final slide of my presentation. So nowadays, you can see there are a lot of designs as I early mentioned, when we go to, buy at least a shirt, then we consider about the color and the designs and the shapes, sometimes material, as well as the brand also. Nowadays, we can see in each and every construction in Sri Lanka, there are a lot of designs. But when actually compared with the ancient creations, modern designs doesn't mean anything. Actually, it means nothing. Sometimes square design, sometimes triangle, but they actually doesn't mean anything. So if we are going to build up a house or a building in Sri Lanka, so we cannot forget the methods used in ancient people. So in this presentation, I tried to explain what are the 4 factors or 5 factors used by the ancient constructors in Sri Lanka and how to utilize those 5 factors for creations of modern buildings. So when you go to Anuradhapura or Polonnaruwa or even in Kandy, when you see an ancient construction, please consider about the 5 factors today I discuss, such as the social and religious aspect and the creativity aspect and technological aspect as the sustainable or adaptability we can see, and the identity. So this is the presentation. So I wind up my presentation. Thank you for everybody.
Thank you for the Venerable Udawala Rewatha hero. Actually, he present very valuable presentation, and he based on the 5 principles of the Vastushastra. Then he discussed about the knowledge of the ancient people, and I think in the ancient building and anything, they give the message to the society how to live and how to do the society works. And I think so that because now we are creating the building and other things, but he said there is nothing to give the message to the society. But the ancient people give the message through whatever creation. That is, I think, that is summary of that. Then we have, I think, 15 minutes to discuss. The participants can ask the question and make the discussion through this from the our Udawala Rewatha Hamaduru, Jambughapiti Hamaduru, and Dr. Rahul. There is then you can ask the question and make the discussion actively. එතකොට දැන් අපේ ශිෂ්‍ය ගොඩක් ඉන්නේ හැම දිනාටම පුළුවන් සිංහලෙනුත් මේ Tamanට තියෙන ප්‍රශ්න ගැන කතා කරලා සාකච්ඡා විදිහට ගෙනියන්න හැමෝටම අවස්ථාව තියෙනවා. There are many participants. You can ask the questions and actually create the discussion. I think අවශ්‍ය මේ ශිෂ්‍යයන්ටත් ගොඩක් ප්‍රශ්න ඇති දැන් ඉගෙනගත්තු දේවල් සහ මෙතන සාකච්ඡා වෙච්ච දේවල් අතර ගොඩක් ගැටලු තියෙන්න පුළුවන්. අහන්න ඔබගේ දැනුම සඳහා. ඔව් අහන්න. සාකච්ඡාවට විවෘතයි හැම කෙනෙක්ටම. මම අපේ ජම්බුගහපිටිය හාමුදුරන්ගෙන් ප්‍රශ්නයක් අහුවොත් ශිෂ්‍යයන්ගේ දැන ගැනීම සඳහා දැනට පාවිච්චි කරන මේ මාන පරිමා වර්තමාන කාලෙත් ඒ විදිහටම පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් නම් අර වාස්තු ශාස්ත්‍රවල සඳහන් වෙලා තියෙන අපි යාවැට එහෙමනේ ගන්නෙ. අන්න ඒ මාන ක්‍රම දැන් වර්තමානයේ පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන් ද වහන්සේ ඒ පරිේශන වලට අනුව.
ඒක හොඳ ප්‍රශ්නයක් සෑහුවේ. ඇත්තටම මේ ඒක ඉස්සර පාවිච්චි කරපු ක්‍රමයක්. දැන් ඔය යව 8ක් අංගුලයයි අංගුල 24ක් හස්තයයි ඒ විදිහට එන මේ මාන චක්‍රය. එතකොට ඒක තමයි සාමාන්‍ය වාස්තු ශාස්ත්‍ර ග්‍රන්ථවල අපිට හම්බ වෙන මාන චක්‍රය. ඇත්තටම දැන් වාස්තු ශාස්ත්‍රවල දැන් මේ මිනුම් ගන්න ක්‍රම කිහිපයක් තියෙනවා. එකක් තමයි දැන් ඔය සම්මත ක්‍රමය තමයි ඒක. දැන් ඔය අපිට පොත්වල හම්බ වෙන ඔය යව 8 වලින් යව 8ක් අංගුලයයි එහෙම එන මාන චක්‍රය ඊට අමතරව අර අපි කියන්නේ වඩුරියන කියලා. එතකොට මේ එයාගේ වැලමිටේ ඉඳලා මැද ඇඟිල්ල අග දක්වා ගන්න ක්‍රමය මේ දිග අරගෙන ඒක බෙදලා අරගෙන එහෙම මනින්නත් පුළුවන්. එහෙම නැත්තම් මේ ඔය කවුද ඒකට අනුශාසනය කරන නැත්නම් සල්ලි දීපෙක් කරන මොකක් හරි බිල්ඩින් එකක් හදන්න සල්ලි දීපෙක් කරන ඒ වගේ එක ක්‍රම වලට අරන් තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඉතින් සර් දැන් ඒක එක පැත්තකින් දැන් අපි කොහොමත් පාවිච්චි කරන්නේත් නෑ ඔය යවමාන ක්‍රමය. එක්තරා විදිහක අනුපාතයක්. ඒ කියන්නේ ඒගොල්ලෝ පාවිච්චි කරපු මිනුම් කිසියම් විදිහකට සම්මුතිගත කිරීමක් තමයි එතන කරලා තියෙන්නේ. ඒවා මං හිතන්නේ අපි දැන් එහෙම පාවිච්චි කරන්න ඕන කියලා ඉතින්. නමුත් ඉතින් මේ ඒකට අනුරූප මිනුමක් අපිට හදාගෙන පාවිච්චි කරන්න පුළුවන්.
එමේ ආවද මම මේ හැමෝගෙම දැන ගැනීම සඳහා තමයි ප්‍රශ්න කරන්න කියලා හිතුවේ. ඊළඟට තමයි දැන් හාමුදුරනේ දැන් අපි යව කියනවා දැන් වර්තමානයේ නම් මේවා හයිබ්‍රිඩ් ක්‍රමයට හදනවා. ඒතර ප්‍රමාණ දැන් අපි දී ගත්තොත් V8 වල විවිධ ප්‍රමාණ තියෙනවා. සම්භවල වෙන එහෙම තියෙනවා. එතකොට අපිට නිශ්චිතයක් තියෙනවා ඒ කාලේ යව ඇටයක ප්‍රමාණය යම් කිසි නිකන් හිතා ගන්න පුළුවන් ප්‍රමාණයක් තියෙනවාද?
නෑ සර් දැන්
කිව්වහම බොහෝ දුරට මම හිතන්නේ වීඩ් කියන එක තමයි ගන්නෙ මම.
බාර්ලි කියලා අදහසක් තියෙනවා සර් යව බාර්ලි කියලා. ඒක සර් දැන් ඇත්තටම දැන් අපිට දැන් හම්බෙන පොත්වල දැන් මානසාර මයමත වගේ වස්ස ඇත්තටම ඒවා ගොඩක් ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් ටෙක්ස්ට් බුක් වගේ පාවිච්චි කරපු ඒවා. ඊට අමතරව ප්‍රායෝගික භාවිතයේදී ගොඩාක් පොත් පාවිච්චි කරලා තියෙනවා සහ ඒවේ අර පොඩි වර්ෂන්ස් තියෙනවා. ඒ කියන්නේ අපි කියමුකෝ මානසාරම වුණත් දැන් එක ගුරුකුලයක මානසාරම පාවිච්චි කරගෙන ඉද්දී ඒගොල්ලෝ පරම්පරාවෙන් ඇවිල්ලා ඒකම පොඩ ඒගොල්ලෝ වෙනස් කරගෙන තියෙනවා. එතකොට දැන් මේ අර ස්ටෑන්ඩඩ් පොතේ තියෙන මිනුම්ම එහෙමම ඒගොල්ලෝ පාවිච්චි කරන්නේත් නැහැ. සහ ප්‍රාදේශීය වශයෙන් උත්සව දැන් ඒවේ වෙනස්කම් තියෙනවා. කියන්නේ අර අපේ ඔරිජිනල් පොතේ තියෙන එක කියන්නේ මේ සූත්‍ර ටික එහෙමම තියෙනවා. මාන චක්‍රය එහෙමම තියෙනවා. හැබැයි ඒගොල්ලෝ ප්‍රාදේශීය ඒ කියන්නේ ඒ පළාත්වල පාවිච්චි කරන්න ගියාට පස්සේ ඒවා වෙනස්කම් තිබෙනවා. දැන් උදාහරණයක් විදිහට ගණේශ දෛවඥගේ මේ බුද්ධ විලාසනී ටීකාව ලීලාවතීට ලියපු බුද්ධ විලාසනී ටීකාවේ මේ මගධ කාරිකාව ඔය මේ ධාන්‍ය මැනීම ගැන කතා කරනකොට එයා හොඳට විස්තර කරන මේ මගධ කාරිකාව කියන්නේ මොකක්ද කියලා ඉවරලා ඊට පස්සේ ඒකේ කියනවා මේ නන්දිග්‍රාමයේ කාරිකාව කියලා කියන්නේ මෙන්න මෙහෙම එකක්. ඒකේ ඒගොල්ලෝ නන්දිග්‍රාමයේදී මනින්නේ මෙන්න මේ විදිහට. හැබැයි මේ අපේ ගමේදී මනින්නේ මේ විදිහට නෙවෙයි කියලා එයා මේ මගධ කාරිකාවම ගම් දෙකේ පාවිච්චි කරන විදිහේ වෙනස එයා කියනවා. හැබැයි අර ඔරිජිනල් පොතේ තියෙන්නේ වෙනස් විදිහක එකක්. ඒක තමයි ඒගොල්ලෝ ඉතින් අර මේ පරමාදර්ශය වගේ තියාගෙන ඉන්නේ. නමුත් පාවිච්චියේදී ඒක ඒගොල්ලන්ට ගැලපෙන විදිහට වෙනස් කරගෙන තියෙනවා සර්. අනිත් මිනුත් එහෙම තමයි සර්.
හොඳයි ෆයින්. බොහොම ස්තුතියි. අතන මම ප්‍රශ්නකාරක නෙමෙයි. මම ඔඩියන්ස් එකට තමයි අවස්ථාව ලබා දෙන්නේ. අර යන්න ඉදිරියට ගෙනියන්න ප්‍රශ්න තියෙනවා විසඳ ගන්න ඕනේ. I would like to call to the Dr. Rahul join. What about modern society? They use the techniques of the Vastushastra, ancient techniques of the in India.
So unfortunately, answer is more inclined towards negative. The reason is they do claim that they are using the Vastushastra principles, but as I was mentioning in my paper, it is more towards the auspiciousness and the directions. That's what they think as a Vastushastra. Unfortunately, the core principle of natural optimization of light, wind, those principles are completely ignored. I don't blame them. The reason is it's much more a commercial institutionalization today, the construction industry, rather than more as social orientation. So the remedy might be, as the consumer, if I use the word, from the dweller perspective, or the people like you and me who are buying the homes, if we are becoming much more knowledgeable and demanding, then I believe the industry have to follow certain kind of an minimum principles of Vastushastra in their contemporary design. One aspect which immediately can be taken up and which I could see is happening is the entire amalgamation of architectural science and civil engineering has to be seen as a one discipline rather than two different disciplines, which is a typical British way of looking at the entire building programs. I think there we have seen much more positivity, and we can claim that that's an ancient thought of Vastushastra.
May I ask a question?
Please, sir.
I know in India there are some projects going on to study astrology and astronomy. Basically, to study manuscript, ancient manuscripts in different repositories and libraries. Is there any such kind of projects going on to study the ancient manuscripts on Vastushastra and other Silpa texts?
To the best of my knowledge, the Mysore University is the right place where I heard some projects are going on. They do have some manuscripts as well. The other element is from the Shilpa Shastra perspective, I have my own doubts whether we are studying it properly across even the India. More precisely, what is required than the studying the manuscript, because most of the work has already been done and we have a good level of English, or maybe at least in Hindi or maybe in other languages. The treatises are already translated or they are available in the digital form. At least the key Sanskrit texts are now available. What is required is nothing but the interpretation of the current monuments, like a Konark has already been done, Khajuraho is done, Ajanta is done, Verul is done, but there are a lot of thousands and thousands of temples which the survey itself has not happened. Their reinterpretation in terms of which particular style of architecture and what are their dimensions are observed on the current structure, and then converting that as a more as an academic literature. I think that would be a fantastic job, rather than getting into a translation of an old text, which is anyway always a good job, but that's always available. What is not available is the reinterpretation of the architecture which is standing for thousands of years and reinterpreting it from the modern perspective.
When you study modern, analyze the temples according to the architectural principles, are there any similarities between the texts and the modern analysis? Are they parallel?
Fantastic question. In fact, I owe this particular knowledge to my late guru, Dr. R.P. Kulkarni, who was a IITian engineer by profession, BTech, MTech, and PhD in civil engineering and structural science. And later, at the age of 55, he turned learning Sanskrit, and then he did his lot of work in Sanskrit treatises and the text. And his subject was exactly what you have mentioned, analyzing the current structures and relating it back to the text. The observations, to be very precise, if I want to answer your question, answer is yes, that we could find a lot of similarities between the text, whatever it is prescribing, and the structure which is actually standing. While we make this statement, we should be also cognizant about one important aspect, that there are three disciplines called Vastushastra, Vastuvidya, and Vastukala. So these are the three different terms. Your question was on Vastushastra, and hence answer is yes. Had it been you tweak your question that what is Vastukala, do we find that relevance with the current structure? The answer is no. So it gives a very good kind of an academic way of looking at the ancient period, that core principles, answer is yes, you could find them. But the liberty has been given to the Sthapati, I believe so, to construct artistically something different than what text talks about. So there's a very homogeneous and very liberal way of probably, I could see the executional excellence, which you could see. So what I mean here is the core principles of Vastushastra, like a natural amenities utilization, the directions, okay, the robustness, no compromise on the quality, the structural effectivity, the life is of 1,000 and more years, the kind of an spacious kind of an element, all the principles are followed. But when it goes to an art, that what should be the decoration element on the pillar, how the overall allocation in terms of, let's say, windows or open spaces or emerging elements to be done, that is completely different when you go even about 50 to 100 kilometers range. If you see the two different temples, you will find a different kind of an reflection on those. However, all the temples in India will strictly follow the longevity, the robustness, the kind of an unique way of utilizing the natural resources.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
I would like to add something in Sinhala also. ප්‍රශ්න දෙක තුනක්ම කතා වෙච්ච නිසා විශේෂයෙන්ම මාන ක්‍රම සම්බන්ධයෙන් සාකච්ඡාවක් ආපු නිසා අපේ සරුත් ඒ ගැන විමසපු නිසා මාන ක්‍රම ගත්තාම යව වලට දැනට අපිට පික්ස් මෙෂර්මන්ට්ස් එකක් දීලා තියෙනවා සම මේ මුෂාලේ චන්ද්‍රිකා පුතේ මිලිමීටර් 3.75 කියන. එතකොට 3.75 millimeter. When we consider about the size of the barley, I think it is clearly mentioned in Manushale Chandrika. So, ඒකට අනුව අපට ගන්න පුළුවන් මේක එක ක්‍රමයක්. ඊළඟට තමයි when we consider about the measurements of Vastushastra, there are two ways. One thing is according to the parts of the body we can measure. We can take the take the types of measurements. For instance, we can take English foot. Foot means 12 inches. They take this foot, according to the, I think, the foot of the King Henry. Okay. his foot is long as 12 inches. That is why they use that measurement even today. That is why it is also called foot. එතකොට ඒ වගේ මේ ලංකාවෙත් ගත්තාම දැන් span වියත හස්ත කියන්නේ අත. When we consider about the cubit, according to the Oxford, there are 18 inches. But according to the Vastushastra test, the standard size is 24 inches. That is called hasta. එතකොට මං හිතනවා වාස්තු විද්‍යාවේදී යම් කිසි හේතුවක් තියෙනවා ඒක ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න. When we consider about the modern engineering aspect, so normally in Sri Lankan context, when we are going to erect or establish a wall, we take the width as the 8 inches or sometimes 9 inches. So what is the reason behind that? You know, sometimes they build up houses, so they actually build up walls by 8 inches and 9 inches because of the blocks they can that is available in the market. But they actually don't concern about the environment and the weather where they build up that construction or house. After building up the construction, they may have to face many problems because, you know, they did not concern about the travel of the sun or sunlight. So, but according to the Vastu, they concern, I think Dr. Rahul sir also knows, I think, according to the Manushale Chandrika, the width of the wall should be in 8 inches. 8 inches. So there is a standard size and there is a reason also. But when we consider about the modern engineering aspect, they say 8. But exactly number, when I talk with some engineers, they say according to the place, according to the building, they actually decide the size of the wall also. ඉතින් මම හිතනවා මේ පැති දෙකම මේ එකට අධ්‍යයනය කරලා තමයි ඉදිරියට අරගෙන යන්න ඕන කියන කාරණාව. ඊළඟට as I mentioned in my presentation, when we consider about the nature of the Vastushastra principles, we consider about the birth time. On the basis of the birth time, we do all the calculations. එතකොට ඒකෙත් තියෙනවා මේ අපි ලෝකයට සම්බන්ධ වීමත් එක්ක, and as I mentioned earlier, there is an interdependence relationship between 5 factors and the persons. So Vastushastra means how to balance these 5 factors. So ඒකින්ද මම හිතන්නේ සර් මේ ජම්බුකා පිටිහාඳුරුත් අහගෙන නැති කියලා මම හිතනවා. මේ අපිට තියෙනවා යම්කිසි හේතුවක්, රීසන් එකක් තියෙනවා. එතකොට දැන් when we consider about the Pinda Chakra, which can be seen in Muhurta Chintamani, that is considered to be the astrological work, but that system is followed in Sri Lanka. එතකොට යම්කිසි based on that Pinda Chakra, we do all the calculation. We take, when we consider about the width and the length of the house, we take according to that chakra. The chakra functions according to the birth time or nakshatra. So that is the center of this calculation related to the Vastushastra. Yes.
I just want to add one point, as you rightly mentioning. This is typically called angula. So the width of a angula. So this is used as the the width here is 2.4
in Sinhala we say angala.
So, hasta is a derived unit, and the base unit in Indian measurement or metrology is typically called angula. The observation is the modern science, which is called ergonomics, which studies the measurement of human body. has got very interesting observation that across all Indian continent for that matter, the hasta dimension might change many a times. Okay, but this particular kind of a middle finger angula is almost constant across all the human, male human. So you can see the intelligence which has been used by ancient seers, that keeping a particular kind of an unit of measure which is not changing person by person. Otherwise, you might get a feel that if it is angula, if it is a hasta, and if your hasta is different than my hasta, then your home probably become much more disproportional to my home. But that has been maintained very well by keeping a one unit of measure which is almost constant across all humans. That's a
I
small
think,
point.
yeah, to my mind, you know that there are more ways to calculate, take the calculation of the house. So there are more optionals. So if we consider about the hasta of a person, that is one method we utilize to take the measurements of the house. And the exact, there is a fixed exact numbers. That is what is called Yava and Liksa in that process. I think Venerable Jambugahapitiya Dhammalokatero explained it. But there is a ratio. There is a ratio. According to that ratio, they actually created this process. We cannot forget it. But even today, when we consider about something, they actually concern about the ratio. But in current society, if we are going to put a door, normally we consider about what is available in the market.
Correct.
Okay? 6 feet height and 3 feet width. So according to that measurement, we created the place for the door.
Perfect.
So that is not the way. That should not be the way.
Agree.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. Our time is, I think, just over. Then I would like to thank for the presenters first of all. That Venerable Jambugahapitiya Dhammaloka Hamudro, we are thank you for you. You rendered your valuable time to us and our university, and therefore I thank you again. And also the Udavela Revata Hamudro, he also rendered his time, not on today, this some more time here. And thank you for him. And Dr. Rahul, I also thank you very much for your participation and your time used for us. And thank you very much. And participants also, yeah, thank you for participation. And it's okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Narmilama.